So I'll tell you what I'd like to do here. I'd like to basically address three questions. I'll put them up on the screen for our viewers. And they're simple questions. Number one, what does this tax overhaul have to do with growth? Number two, how does it affect wages? And number three, how are we going to pay for it? So let's start on the growth premise. Sure. How do you get from the proposals, whether it's House or Senate we're looking at right now, to really the sort of growth that the president has said he's going to deliver?
Well, first, on the individual income tax side, we've got a middle-class tax cut, which means that if you work harder, if you do overtime, then you get to keep more of that money. And the history of things is that that increases labor supply and increases output because people work harder. On the corporate side, what it does is the lower rate and the new international tax rules is we end this sort of scam almost where people locate their factories offshore and move jobs overseas and then ship products back into the U.S. Rather than make them here. And so both of those effects are positive for growth. And then you can say, well, how positive? And we put out a study a few weeks ago where we estimated that 10 years from now, GDP would be between 3 and 5% higher.
Yeah, and I want to talk about that study in just a moment, but let me play something for you. We have Bob Kimmett, who I'm sure you know, used to be #2 at Treasury and other positions. We had him on earlier in this program, and we asked him, because he was the general counsel, actually, of the Department of Treasury in '86, when they redid the tax code last time, about the growth possibility. And he agreed with you in the short term, but he had some concerns over the medium and long term. Just listen to what Bob had to say.
I think it will certainly boost growth in the near term. Where I think we need to watch very carefully is what are the mid to long-term effects. And personally, in that regard, I think we have to go back to doing what we can to keep our deficit and debt under control.
So Kevin, what he was saying was back in '86, they were much closer to revenue neutral than what this proposal looks like. Should we be concerned about the effects on growth, quite specifically on growth of the sort of deficit we're looking at here?
Right. Well, you know, absolutely the deficit matters, and anyone who says it doesn't is just wrong. But the fact is that the numbers that we've been bandying about the cost of this bill are static scoring numbers. And again, on the corporate side especially, you know, firms aren't creating factories very much in the U.S. at all. They're putting them in Ireland and other places, and we're barely getting any revenue at all. We have the highest corporate tax in the developed world, but almost no revenue because they're just moving the money offshore to avoid the U.S. tax. And so the idea that if we become an attractive location, it's going to blow a hole in the deficit is just one that I don't accept. Now, the way to think about it is the Joint Tax Committee's score in the 10th year is that this will reduce tax revenues on a static basis by about $170 billion. But the CBO estimates that GDP, absent the growth effects of this bill in the 10th year, will be $28 trillion. And so it's not really a stretch to think that you could get enough growth to cover the little bit of a hole that's left over.
So let me move to the second question, which what are the effects on wages? Because that's one of the things the president said is very important to him. Why do you believe that if we put more money in the pockets of corporations, that will actually turn into wages?
Sure. It actually goes back to when I was a kid. I ran a lawn mowing business, and I used to, first I started mowing lawns with just a push mower that didn't have any self-propelled engine. It was just, you know, these hard to push wheels. And then I got a self-propelled mower, and it moved a lot faster, and I could mow more lawns and I made more money. And so if you get a better machine, then you become more productive and your wages go up. And right now, the contributions of better machines to wage growth in the U.S. actually went negative in the second term of President Obama. And so we were so harsh towards business and such an unfriendly environment that the contribution to productivity growth of better machines actually went negative for the first time since the Second World War.
Well, let's go back to
that. So what we're doing is we're just saying, let's go back to normal with that. Let's become an attractive place to locate activity.
Let's go back to that study that is on your site that we've taken a look at. And I really wonder whether that connection between productivity and wage growth would be supported by most labor economists, because you can have increases in productivity and not increase wages. I can tell you CEOs don't sit around and say, look, we've got more money, let's give it to the workers. It's not the way it works.
No, there is a strong link between productivity growth and wages. There's a guy at Harvard University named Robert Lawrence, and people could Google his work to see how it works. But the fact has been that productivity has slowed down to almost nothing, and wages have slowed down to almost nothing. And you're right to worry that, okay, so say Kevin's right, and we get all this capital formation in the U.S. and we get a lot of productivity. How do I know for sure that that's going to go into wages? Well, it's possible that it won't. But in a world where it doesn't, then basically what has to be the case is that the guys who have the create the higher productivity don't have to compete for workers. As soon as they have to compete for workers, then wages go up with productivity. And again, looking around the world, countries that have done exactly what we're proposing have seen productivity growth go up and wage growth go up.